The rain pounded against the windows of Ricardo Alencar's cramped apartment in downtown Boston, matching the rhythm of his frustrated typing. Once a respected name in investigative journalism, Ricardo now found himself relegated to writing fluff pieces for a small local newspaper. 15 years earlier, his mentor, James Mitchell, had disappeared while investigating government corruption, leaving behind only cryptic notes and a legacy that haunted Ricardo daily. The newsroom photo of them together, James's arm around his shoulder, both smiling with the confidence of men who believed truth would always prevail, now seemed like a cruel joke. "Another rejection," Ricardo muttered, crumpling the email printout and tossing it toward an overflowing trash can. The year was 1976, and while the country celebrated its bicentennial with parades and fireworks, Ricardo was drowning in unpaid bills and whiskey. The Watergate scandal had briefly reignited his hope that investigative journalism could make a difference, but that flame was quickly extinguished when he realized that for every Nixon, dozens of powerful figures continued operating in the shadows. His phone rang, startling him from his self-pity. "Alencar," he answered gruffly. "Ricardo? It's Tom Geller from the Boston Chronicle archives." The voice was hesitant, almost whispering. "Found something while clearing out the old filing cabinets. Some of Mitchell's old case files. They were hidden behind a false panel. You should come see this." Ricardo's heart raced as he grabbed his coat, the familiar surge of adrenaline temporarily washing away years of cynicism. The Boston Chronicle building stood like a weathered sentinel in the rain, its once grand facade now peeling and neglected, much like journalism itself, Ricardo thought bitterly. Tom met him in the basement archives, a labyrinth of metal shelving and yellowing paper. "I shouldn't be showing you this," he said, glancing nervously at the door. "They're moving everything to microfilm next month and destroying the originals. These would have been lost forever." The box contained dozens of case files, unsolved murders, disappearances, and suspicious accidents spanning from 1960 to 1972. All had been officially closed, but James's meticulous notes in the margins told a different story. Names were circled, connected by lines with question marks and exclamation points, creating a constellation of suspicion. "This doesn't make sense," Ricardo murmured, leafing through the documents. "These cases seem completely unrelated. A factory fire in Springfield, a judge's suicide in Worcester, a bus accident in Pittsfield." "That's what everyone was supposed to think," came a voice from the doorway. Ricardo turned to see a young woman, rain dripping from her coat, clutching a leather messenger bag. "But they're connected," Tom stammered. "I'm sorry, this area is restricted." "It's okay," she interrupted, approaching with determined steps. "My name is Helena Winters. I'm a law student at Boston University, and I've been tracking these cases for 2 years. She pulled out a notebook identical to James's. "I believe your mentor was onto something big before he disappeared, Mr. Alencar, something that got him killed." Ricardo studied her, mid-20s, with intense eyes that reminded him of his younger self. "How do you know about James Mitchell? And how did you know I'd be here?" "Because my father was Judge William Winters." She pulled out a newspaper clipping showing a distinguished man being carried from his home in a body bag. "The judge who supposedly killed himself in Worcester. I've been following your career since Mitchell disappeared. I know you've been struggling, but I also know you're the only journalist who might believe me." Ricardo's instinct was to dismiss her. He'd encountered plenty of conspiracy theorists over the years, but something in her eyes, a certainty beyond mere conviction, made him pause. "Why me?" he asked, already knowing the answer. "Because you have nothing left to lose," Helena replied, "and because you owe it to James Mitchell." The words stung with truth. Ricardo looked at the box of files, then at the raindrops tracking down Helena's determined face. "What exactly do you think these cases have in common?" "Operation Mockingbird," she whispered. "It wasn't just about controlling the media. There was a domestic component, eliminating threats, controlling narratives, protecting assets. My father discovered something he wasn't supposed to know." Tom cleared his throat nervously. "You two should continue this elsewhere. I've already risked enough." Ricardo nodded, gathering the files into his weathered briefcase. "We'll need somewhere safe to work." "I have a place," Helena said. "My professor's cabin in the Berkshires. No phone, no connections. We can sort through everything there." As they left the building, Ricardo felt eyes on them from across the street. A black sedan with government plates. The driver made no attempt to hide his surveillance, even nodding slightly when Ricardo made eye contact. "We're being watched," he muttered to Helena. "We always have been," she replied. "The question is, are we finally ready to watch back?" The rain intensified as they hurried to Ricardo's rusty Chevrolet. He knew this moment marked a point of no return, a last chance at redemption or the final nail in his journalistic coffin. Either way, for the first time in years, Ricardo Alencar felt alive. The cabin stood silent among towering pines, 30 miles from the nearest town. Built in the 1940s by Helena's professor, a constitutional law expert who'd once defended blacklisted writers during the McCarthy era, it offered both sanctuary and strategic isolation. Ricardo spread the files across a wooden table while Helena pinned maps and photographs to the walls, creating a visual web of connections. "Your mentor was methodical," Helena remarked, tracing her finger along a timeline James had constructed. "He noticed patterns nobody else did. Deaths occurring within weeks of each other, witnesses changing testimonies, evidence disappearing." Ricardo nodded, studying a photograph of a factory fire that had killed 12 workers in 1967. "Springfield Manufacturing, I remember this case. Official report cited faulty wiring, but James suspected it was connected to their government contracts. My father presided over the wrongful death lawsuit," Helena added. "He initially ruled against the company, then suddenly reversed his decision after a weekend fishing trip with old friends. 3 months later, he was dead." As night fell, they worked by lamplight, the cabin creaking around them. Each case yielded connections to the others, the same law firm handling settlements, identical language in coroner's reports, witnesses who mysteriously relocated to different states. Most disturbingly, many files contained references to psychological assessments conducted before the incidents. "Look at this," Ricardo said, holding up a document. Before the Pittsfield bus crash, all 5 victims had participated in a voluntary study at Boston University's psychology department, supposedly testing the effects of caffeine on attention. Helena's eyes widened. "My father mentioned a program called MK Ultra in his notes. CIA mind control experiments. Most people think it ended in the mid-60s, but what if it didn't? What if it just went deeper underground?" "That's a hell of a leap," Ricardo cautioned, though his journalist's instinct was buzzing. "We need hard evidence, not theories." "We have this," Helena replied, pulling a small key from a locket around her neck. "It opens a safe deposit box at First National in Boston. My father left it for me with instructions to only use it if something happened to him. I've been too afraid until now." Ricardo was about to respond when headlights swept across the cabin windows. They froze, exchanging alarmed glances. No one knew they were here except Helena's professor, who was currently in Europe. "Back door," Ricardo whispered, gathering the most crucial documents. They slipped out into the forest just as car doors slammed in the front yard. Through the trees, they watched as 3 men in suits methodically searched the cabin, photographing their investigation board before dismantling it. One man spoke into a radio, gesturing toward the forest. "They're going to search the area," Helena whispered. "We need to move." They navigated through the darkness, guided only by moonlight filtering through the canopy. Ricardo's mind raced. How had they been found? Was there a bug in his car, a tracker on Helena, or was the surveillance more extensive than they had imagined? After hours of tense hiking, they reached a small roadside diner near the Massachusetts-New York border. Exhausted and mud-splattered, they huddled in a corner booth. "We can't go back to Boston," Ricardo said, warming his hands on a coffee mug. They'll be watching bus stations, trains, airports. I have a friend in New York, Helena replied. A classmate who left law school to become a reporter for the Village Voice. She's been investigating government surveillance of activist groups. She might help us. Ricardo studied Helena's face in the harsh diner lighting. Behind her determination, he saw fear and something else. There's more to your involvement than your father, isn't there? What aren't you telling me? Helena's composure cracked slightly. My younger brother, Michael. He volunteered for what he thought was a psychology experiment at university in 1972. They paid well, and he needed the money for school. After the third session, he changed, became paranoid, had terrible nightmares. Then one day, he attacked our neighbor with a kitchen knife, claiming the man was sending radio signals into his brain. Her voice broke. He's been in a psychiatric hospital ever since. The doctors call it acute schizophrenia, but the timing was too perfect. It happened 2 weeks before my father's suicide. Ricardo reached across the table, squeezing her hand. The gesture surprised them both. Human connection had become foreign to him over years of isolation. I'm sorry, he said simply. I don't want your sympathy, Helena replied, though she didn't withdraw her hand. I want your help exposing the truth. The waitress approached, refilling their coffees. You folks look like you've had quite a night, she remarked, eyeing their muddy clothes. Car trouble, Ricardo offered with a practiced smile. After she left, Helena leaned forward. The safe deposit box. Whatever my father hid there must be significant. It's our best lead. And walking into a bank in Boston is exactly what they'll expect us to do, Ricardo countered. Not if we're smart about it. Not if we have help. Helena's eyes lit up with sudden inspiration. Your former colleagues at the major newspapers, surely some of them still respect you? Ricardo laughed bitterly. Respect is a strong word. Most think I'm a burnout who couldn't handle the pressure. But would they listen if you had proof? Real evidence of government experimentation on American citizens. For the first time, Ricardo allowed himself to imagine success, breaking a story that would dwarf Watergate, vindicating James's work, redeeming his own failed career. It was intoxicating and dangerous. We'd need absolute proof, he said slowly, and a strategy to release the information that couldn't be contained or discredited. First steps first, Helena replied. We get to New York, contact my friend, then figure out how to access that safe deposit box without getting caught. As dawn broke, they paid their bill and hitched a ride with a trucker heading to Albany. From there, they could make their way to New York City. The air between them had changed. Skepticism giving way to fragile trust, individual quests merging into shared purpose. In the truck's side mirror, Ricardo watched the sunrise illuminate the road behind them. Somewhere back there, powerful people were already mobilizing to stop them. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, Ricardo felt the fog of cynicism lifting. This wasn't just about redemption anymore. It was about justice, for James, for Judge Winters, for Helena's brother, and for countless others whose stories had been buried. And perhaps, he thought as the mountains receded behind them, it was about something even more fundamental, the right of Americans to know what was being done in their name, behind the closed doors of democracy. New York City embraced them in its anonymous chaos, a concrete jungle where two more desperate faces barely registered amid the millions navigating its streets. Helena's friend, Diane Sawyer, lived in a cramped Greenwich Village apartment that doubled as an unofficial newsroom, walls plastered with clippings and leads for stories the mainstream media wouldn't touch. Jesus, Helena, when you said you were in trouble, I didn't think you meant this kind of trouble, Diane exclaimed after hearing their story. A cigarette dangled from her fingers as she examined James Mitchell's notes. These people don't play games. If they're really continuing MK Ultra under a different name, they'll burn the whole world down before letting it go public. We need to get into that safe deposit box, Ricardo insisted. Everything hinges on what Judge Winters left behind. Diane nodded thoughtfully. I might know someone who can help. Former CIA analyst turned whistleblower. He's been feeding me information on domestic surveillance for months. If anyone can get you safely into that bank, it's him. The whistleblower, who insisted on being called only Davis, met them in the back room of a jazz club in Harlem. With thinning hair and thick glasses, he looked more like an accountant than a spy, but his eyes held the vigilant wariness of someone who had seen behind the curtain. First National Bank has cameras, armed guards, and likely federal agents watching for you, Davis explained, sketching the bank's layout on a napkin. But they're expecting Ricardo Alencar and Helena Winters, not Father Thomas Riley and Sister Margaret from St. Bartholomew's Church in Albany, coming to access a donation box for their parish building fund. 3 days later, Ricardo adjusted the clerical collar that felt like it was choking him as he and Helena, dressed as a nun, walked confidently into First National Bank. Davis had provided flawless documentation and backstory, along with a makeup job that added 20 years to Ricardo's face. "Remember," Helena whispered through barely moving lips, "we're solemn, professional, and utterly boring. The kind of people whose eyes slide right over." The bank manager was appropriately deferential to members of the clergy, escorting them personally to the vault. Ricardo held his breath as Helena inserted the key into box the 1967, her father's birth year. Inside lay a single manila envelope and a small reel of magnetic tape. "Bless you for your assistance," Ricardo intoned gravely as they left, fighting the urge to run. Back at Diane's apartment, they carefully opened the envelope. It contained photographs, financial records, and a handwritten letter from Judge Winters, "To whom it may concern. If you're reading this, I am dead, likely by means made to look like suicide. The enclosed evidence documents a program codenamed Artichoke, the successor to MKUltra. Unlike its predecessor, Artichoke focuses not merely on mind control, but on creating programmed assets, American citizens conditioned to perform specific actions without conscious awareness or memory." Ricardo's hands trembled as he continued reading. The judge had stumbled upon the program while presiding over a seemingly routine case involving a man who had attempted to assassinate a visiting foreign diplomat. The man had no memory of the event and no prior history of violence or political extremism. The tape contains recorded conversations between program directors discussing successful implementations and failed assets. The letter continued. "Most disturbing is their discussion of future domestic applications. I fear this program represents not merely isolated experiments, but a systematic effort to develop methods of social control. I entrust this evidence to whoever finds it, with the prayer that truth will prevail." The letter was signed and dated 1 week before the judge's death. Diane's contact at the Village Voice had equipment to play the tape. The grainy audio revealed clinical discussions between unnamed officials about programming reliability and trigger mechanisms. One voice calmly detailed how a subject had successfully carried out a sanitation procedure against a liability in Worcester. "That was the week before my father died," Helena whispered, her face ashen. Most damning was a discussion about expanding the program's scope. Congressional oversight is becoming problematic. "The solution may require demonstration of domestic application. Several candidates have been identified in positions of influence." "This is it," Ricardo breathed. "The smoking gun. They're talking about using these techniques against American political figures." Diane shook her head grimly. "It's explosive, but it's not enough. You have circumstantial evidence and anonymously recorded conversations. They'll discredit it, call it a hoax, maybe even claim it's Soviet disinformation." "What about the files from the cabin?" Helena argued. "The pattern of cases, the connections." "All circumstantial," Diane countered. "You need someone from inside the program willing to testify, a living witness." Ricardo paced the small apartment, mind racing. "The victims are either dead or discredited. The perpetrators won't talk. We need—" He stopped suddenly, turning to Helena. "Your brother. You said he was affected by these experiments. Is there any chance he could testify? Helena's expression darkened. Michael hasn't spoken coherently in years. The doctors keep him heavily sedated. But if we could get him out, get him clean, maybe with proper care. It's too dangerous, Diane interjected. For him and for you, they'll be watching his facility. It might be our only option, Ricardo insisted, a living victim with a clear connection to Judge Winters. If we could document his condition, then prove it was caused by these experiments. The room fell silent as the gravity of what they were considering sank in. Breaking a patient out of a psychiatric institution wasn't just illegal. It was potentially harmful to Michael himself. Helena finally spoke, her voice strained but resolute. There's a doctor at Boston University who specializes in trauma and memory recovery, Dr. Sarah Levin. She was helping my father investigate Michael's case unofficially before everything happened. If anyone could help him, it's her. Can you trust her? Ricardo asked. With my life and Michael's. Davis arranged for secure transportation to Massachusetts, using a network of anti-war activists who operated an underground railroad of sorts for draft dodgers and deserters. As they journeyed north, Ricardo and Helena worked tirelessly to organize their evidence, creating multiple copies to be held by trusted individuals across the country. If something happens to us, Ricardo told Diane before leaving, publish everything. Every newspaper, every senator's office, every television station. The psychiatric hospital where Michael was held sat isolated on the outskirts of Boston, a sprawling Victorian-era building with modern security additions. Getting in would be nearly impossible, but they had an unexpected ally. Dr. Levin not only still worked with trauma patients, but had recently taken a consulting position at the very facility holding Michael. His condition has deteriorated, Dr. Levin informed them during a clandestine meeting at her home. The hospital's approach has been pharmaceutical management rather than therapeutic intervention. But I've observed something interesting. His episodes follow patterns, almost like coded responses to specific stimuli. Triggers, Ricardo said, remembering the tape. Just like they discussed. Dr. Levin nodded grimly. I can help you see him, but removing him from the facility would require official discharge papers, papers that only the director can approve. And the director? Helena asked. Dr. Walter Freeman. He visits only monthly, spending most of his time at a research facility in Maryland. She hesitated. A facility rumored to be connected to government intelligence programs. The pieces were falling into place with terrifying clarity. Michael wasn't just a victim, he was still an active subject in their program, his deterioration carefully monitored and documented. We need those discharge papers, Ricardo said. Can they be forged? Dr. Levin shook her head. The security is too tight, but... She paused, considering. Freeman is due for his monthly visit tomorrow. If someone could access his office during his rounds, his signature stamp and letterhead are kept in his desk. It was a desperate plan, with countless potential points of failure. But as Ricardo looked at Helena, her determination undiminished despite everything they'd learned, he knew they had no choice. Michael Winters wasn't just their best hope for exposing the truth. He was an innocent man suffering ongoing abuse at the hands of his own government. Tomorrow, then, he said, feeling the weight of what lay ahead. We get those papers, we get Michael out, and we bring this whole thing into the light. As night fell over Boston, Ricardo stood by the window of Dr. Levin's guest room, watching for signs of surveillance. The city lights blurred through the rain-streaked glass, each one representing a person going about their life, unaware of the machinery operating in the shadows. Do you think we can really do this? Helena asked softly from the doorway. Ricardo turned to her, seeing not just determination now, but fear. A very human fear that had been there all along, masked by purpose and righteous anger. I don't know, he answered honestly, but I know we have to try. She nodded, accepting his answer. I keep thinking about something my father used to say. Justice isn't just about punishing the guilty, it's about restoring what was taken. I want that for Michael, for your mentor, for all of them. As she turned to go, Ricardo called after her. Helena, she paused. Whatever happens tomorrow, James would have been proud to have you on this story. A small smile touched her lips, the first he'd seen since they met. Get some rest, Alencar. Tomorrow we make history, or we become part of it. As Ricardo lay awake in the darkness, he realized something had fundamentally shifted within him. The cynicism that had been his shield for so long had given way to something he barely recognized. Hope. Not naive optimism, but the steeled hope of someone who had seen the worst of humanity and still chosen to fight. Tomorrow would bring either vindication or ruin. Either way, for the first time in years, Ricardo Alencar was facing the future without flinching. Morning arrived with an unexpected ally, dense fog that wrapped Boston in a ghostly shroud, providing natural cover for their approach to Westfield Psychiatric Hospital. Dr. Levine drove, her hospital ID ensuring they passed the outer security checkpoint without scrutiny. Ricardo and Helena huddled in the back seat, both disguised as medical students, accompanying the doctor on her rounds. Doctor, Freeman arrived 30 minutes ago, Levin informed them, parking in the staff lot. He always follows the same routine. Administrative meetings until 10 Gao, then patient evaluations starting with the East Wing. His office will be unoccupied for approximately 45 minutes. The hospital corridors echoed with the sounds of institutional living. Muffled conversations, occasional outbursts, the squeak of orderlies' shoes on polished floors. Doctor. Levin nodded professionally to staff members as she led Ricardo and Helena through a labyrinth of hallways. Freeman's office, she whispered, gesturing to a door with a frosted glass window. I'll create a distraction at the nurses' station. You'll have maybe 10 minutes. Ricardo felt adrenaline coursing through him as he picked the lock, a skill learned from a source during his reporting days. Inside, the office was meticulously organized, walls lined with medical texts and framed credentials. Check the desk for the stamp and letterhead, he instructed Helena, while he began photographing the files labeled Special Cases with a miniature camera Davis had provided. Helena rifled through drawers with practiced efficiency. Got them, she whispered, securing the stamp and several sheets of letterhead in her bag. And something else. She held up a small red notebook. Patient trigger protocols. Ricardo's camera clicked rapidly as he captured page after page of damning documentation. The files contained not just Michael's case, but dozens of others, subjects categorized by suggestibility ratings and implementation success. Most disturbing were the cross-references to field applications with dates that aligned perfectly with several of the incidents from James Mitchell's files. We need to move, Helena urged, glancing at her watch. They slipped out, rejoining Dr. Levin, who led them to the secure ward where Michael was held. Using her access card, she bypassed the additional security measures. Helena, she warned quietly, he may not recognize you. Don't be alarmed by his appearance or behavior. Nothing could have prepared Helena for the sight of her brother. Once a vibrant, intelligent young man with aspirations of becoming an engineer, Michael Winters now sat motionless by a window, his gaze fixed on nothing. His once robust frame had withered, and premature grey streaked his hair. "Michael?" Helena approached slowly, her voice catching. "It's me, Helena." No response. Not even a flicker of recognition. Dr. Levin checked his chart. They've increased his medication again. He's essentially in a chemically induced stupor. "Can you reverse it?" Ricardo asked. "Partially, but it would take time. Time we don't have. The best chance is to get him out first, then gradually reduce the medications under proper care." Working quickly, Dr. Levin prepared the discharge papers while Ricardo stood guard. Helena knelt beside her brother, speaking softly about memories from their childhood. Summers at Cape Cod, the tree house their father built, the telescope Michael received for his 10th birthday. "We're taking you home," she promised. though she wasn't sure he could hear her. The facility's discharge procedures required signatures from the attending physician, the ward supervisor, and final approval from the medical director, all roles conveniently filled by Dr. Freeman for special cases like Michael. Dr. Levin expertly forged the necessary signatures, using the stamp for Freeman's final authorization. "Wheelchair," she instructed, retrieving one from the hallway. "Standard protocol for discharged patients." They were nearly at the main entrance when an alarm blared through the facility. Over the intercom, a measured voice announced, "Code Yellow. All personnel implement security protocol. Code Yellow." "They've discovered the break-in," Dr. Levin realized. "We need to move faster." Security guards began checking IDs at all exits. Their original escape route was blocked. "Service entrance," Dr. Levin decided, abruptly changing direction. Through the kitchens. They navigated through bustling food preparation areas, drawing curious glances, but no challenges, thanks to Dr. Levin's authoritative presence. The service entrance opened onto a loading dock, where delivery trucks arrived with supplies. "My car is too far," Dr. Levin said, "and they'll be watching for it." Ricardo spotted a laundry truck preparing to depart. "There, it's our only chance." While Dr. Levin distracted the driver with questions about a fictional delivery, Ricardo and Helena carefully moved Michael into the back of the truck, concealing themselves among bags of linens. The truck departed minutes later, passing through security with only a cursory check. They abandoned the truck 10 blocks away, transferring Michael to a car Davis had arranged. By sunset, they were at a safe house in rural New Hampshire, a former summer camp now used by Dr. Levin's network of psychiatric reformers who helped patients transition from institutional settings. "I've begun reducing his medications," Dr. Levin informed them on the second day. "It's a delicate process. Too fast could trigger psychosis. Too slow keeps him unavailable as a witness." While they waited, Ricardo and Diane worked remotely to prepare their story, organizing evidence and securing commitments from trusted journalists to simultaneously publish their findings. Davis arranged for copies of the tapes and documents to reach sympathetic members of Congress. On the fourth day, Michael spoke his first coherent sentence. "They're in my head, always watching." By the end of the week, under Dr. Levin's expert care, Michael's lucidity returned in increasing intervals. During these periods, he confirmed what they had suspected. His treatment had been experimental, designed to test methods of implanting commands and manipulating behavior. "They would show me images, play sounds, inject something that burned," he recalled haltingly. "Then blackness, then waking up having done things I couldn't remember." Most significantly, he identified photographs of several program administrators, including Dr. Freeman, who had personally overseen his conditioning. "We have enough," Ricardo told Helena after 10 days. "Documented evidence, inside testimony, financial records showing government funding channels, and now a living witness. It's time." Helena had barely left her brother's side since his rescue, as if afraid he might disappear again. "Will it be enough? These people have covered up everything so far." "Not everything," Ricardo corrected her. "Not this time. We've created a dead man's switch. If anything happens to any of us, everything gets released immediately to over 30 different outlets. They can't stop it all." The publication was scheduled for Monday morning. Front-page exposés in 7 major newspapers, accompanied by television coverage from journalists Diane had cultivated. Ricardo would appear with Michael and Helena in a press conference, presenting their evidence and testimony. The night before, Ricardo found Helena sitting alone on the safe house porch, staring at the stars. "Having second thoughts?" he asked, joining her. She shook her head. "Thinking about my father and your mentor. Wondering if they would believe what we've accomplished. James always said the truth doesn't need believers, it just needs witnesses." Ricardo hesitated, then added, "What happens after tomorrow? Have you thought about it?" "Michael will need ongoing care. Protection, probably." She turned to look at him. "What about you? The great comeback of Ricardo Alencar. You'll have your pick of assignments. Ricardo laughed softly. You know, I haven't thought that far ahead. For years, all I wanted was to restore my reputation, to feel that rush of breaking a big story again. Now I'm thinking there's more important work than chasing bylines. This country has deep wounds that won't heal through one exposé. There are more stories like this, more people like Michael. Helena smiled, understanding. A new mission, then. Maybe. He gestured toward the house where Michael was sleeping peacefully for the first time in years. We gave him back his voice. There are others who need the same chance. The following morning, as they prepared to leave for the press conference, Dr. Levin rushed in with a portable radio. An emergency bulletin interrupted regular programming. A fire had destroyed the offices of the Village Voice overnight. Simultaneous break-ins had occurred at the homes of 3 journalists set to publish their story. They're trying to silence us, Diane said via secure telephone, but they're too late. I've activated our contingency plan. Every copy is being released now, not just to media, but directly to the public. Community radio stations, church groups, student organizations, channels they can't possibly all control. By the time Ricardo, Helena, and Michael arrived at the Federal Building in Boston, crowds had already gathered. News crews jostled for position as Ricardo approached the microphones, flanked by Helena and a fragile but determined Michael. My name is Ricardo Alencar, he began, his voice strong and clear. For too long, I and many others have failed in our duty to tell the most important stories, not through lack of trying, but through systematic obstruction. Today, that changes. As cameras flashed and reporters scribbled furiously, Ricardo presented their evidence methodically. The documents, the recordings, Michael's testimony. He explained the connections between seemingly unrelated cases, the pattern of silencing witnesses, and the ultimate goal of the program. Development of methods to control not just individual behavior, but social movements and political discourse. This is not about politics, he emphasized. This is about fundamental rights and government accountability. What was done to Michael Winters and countless others transcends party lines and ideological divisions. It strikes at the very heart of what it means to be free, to have sovereignty over one's own mind. The questions came in a torrent, skeptical at first, then increasingly urgent as the weight of evidence became clear. While Ricardo handled the press, Helena stood protectively beside Michael, whose presence was the most powerful testimony of all, a living embodiment of the human cost of unchecked power. By evening, the story had exploded nationally. Government officials issued carefully worded denials, while congressional leaders from both parties called for immediate investigations. Former program participants, emboldened by Michael's example, began coming forward with their own testimonies. 3 days later, amid growing public outrage, the president announced the formation of an independent commission to investigate all covert behavioral research programs. Documents were being declassified, facilities closed, and several key officials had resigned or taken administrative leave. It's happening, Helena marveled as they watched the news from a new, safe location. They can't bury it this time. Ricardo nodded, feeling not triumph but a solemn satisfaction. This is just the beginning. The investigations, the hearings, the reforms. It will take years. But it started, she squeezed his hand. That's what matters. In the months that followed, Ricardo declined lucrative offers from major publications, instead establishing an independent investigative unit focused on government accountability. Helena, having completed her law degree, joined a legal team representing victims of government experimentation, with Michael serving as both client and advisor. The full scope of Artichoke and related programs gradually came to light. Experiments conducted on thousands of unwitting Americans, attempts to manipulate public opinion and political movements, and collusion between government agencies and private institutions. The revelations sparked the most significant intelligence community reforms since the nation's founding. 1 year to the day after their story broke, Ricardo visited James Mitchell's grave, placing a copy of their published investigation against the headstone. "We got there, James," he said quietly. "Not as quickly as you would have, but we got there." As he turned to leave, he saw Helena waiting by the cemetery gate, her resilience tempered now by hard-won wisdom. Beside her stood Michael, still fragile but healing, his eyes clear and present in a way they hadn't been for years. Ricardo joined them, and together they walked toward an uncertain but purposeful future. Three people bound not just by what they had uncovered, but by their shared commitment to remembering that democracy's survival depended not on blind faith, but on relentless vigilance. The truth, once revealed, could never be fully buried again, and in that knowledge lay both their greatest achievement and their most enduring responsibility.